Thank you for being here. It's been some time that we have sat together and talked about things in common, so to speak. How have you been?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Been well.
Yes. Let's talk. We talked in the last century, so now we are in the 21st century, and I think it would be appropriate to see how we are up to the challenges of 21st century, and perhaps identify them from a Muslim perspective.
The challenges that we're facing
Yes,
as a community.
As a community.
I think probably the greatest challenge right now that we're facing is the dominant global culture, the globalization, which is in reality westernization, and the widespread impact that the media, overall all media, not simply the television, but films, television, electronic media, newsprint, and magazines, books, that all what this is having, the impact that it's having on culture. If you take India, for example, India, which is a reasonably conservative culture traditionally, with what this country would call conservative values. What's happening in Indian media is unbelievable.
Yeah, Bollywood is going ballistics. Yes.
That they can produce the films that they're producing, the pornography, because for Muslims, pornography is not what this culture would call soft core or hardcore. It is any displays of gratuitous nudity and sexual displays that are inappropriate for family viewing.
It's interesting that you have said two things which are quite important conceptually. One is this term that is being brandished in the media and being used, globalization, and then you have also commented on the media, which perhaps is a vehicle for homogenizing all cultures and
Yes.
beating them into a pulp
Yes.
of globalization.
Yes.
How do you see that?
Well, I think it's an accurate description. It is a vehicle. It's Dawkins, the evolutionist biologist from England, talks about memes as opposed to genes, and memes are ideas that infect the host consciousness, and once they begin to spread, like a gene, they become part. They replicate, and they're transferred to the next generation. And this is what I think the media does very effectively, is that it implants these memes into the consciousness of people where they were not there prior to that. And for the Muslims, because we already have a very clear understanding of the world, to pollute that understanding of the world by giving our opening our minds to very alien ideas, cultures, and I'm not speaking about in some way against cultural interpenetration, the benefit of cultures, but this is not benefit. This is an onslaught. It's we're being literally attacked, and I would say not just the Muslims. I think the American people, the European people, I think people of good will all over the world are feeling this onslaught. They're feeling it in their lives and in their children.
Yeah, but to set the stage right for globalization or without globalization, with or without the media, but the question that we need to examine is whether or not the general intellectual climate prevailing in Islamic countries is going to be able to allow us to evolve in societies which are consistent with the Quranic and the Quranic or true traditions of Islam.
Right.
How do you see that?
Well, first of all, in my own experience, I would say there isn't much of an intellectual climate, which is a serious problem. In the Muslim world, generally, you have two types of people. You have, I don't want to make that stereotype, but I would say that what you find amongst educated people you will get people that are educated in the secular world, and then people that are educated in the religious world. And there are very few people that have really been able to make a bridge between those two worlds and understand the world of the 21st century, and at the same time have a deep rooting in their own tradition and their own understanding. There's very few people that have done that. I've met maybe 3 or 4 in my life as a Muslim. On the other hand, those people that are in the secularized world, in the Muslim world, some of the most brilliant intellects have gone to science and engineering, medicine, things like this. You rarely find people that have a real genius that are directed towards the humanities, directed towards philosophy, directed towards aspects of history, aspects of human society that are absolutely essential to create an intellectual milieu that will enable serious thought to take place.
You see, that really what you are identifying and what we need to reflect upon is that truly when in the great tradition of early Islam, which went back to Greeks, which went back to all the humanities, which synthesized everything, distilled everything, and then packaged everything, and the West benefited from it. And here we are sitting back in the 21st century. There's been a sort of a vacuum or an intellectual drought for the last how many 100 years?
Well, I wouldn't say it's been several hundred years. I think that the Muslims were intellectually active 150 years ago. I really believe that. And I think even into the early part of the 20th century, there were some very brilliant people. One of them was the Mufti of the Ottoman Empire, the last Mufti, Sheikh al-Sabri. He was a genius, and his book on philosophy it's a masterpiece. It should be translated into English. I think we did have intellectuals, but unfortunately, the wave of secularism, and because of the fact that those intellectuals were so deeply rooted in a traditional culture and really weren't prepared for the incredible onslaught that was taking place. I think when they were hit by the West, and it begins when Napoleon's invasion of Egypt, that's when the heartland was hit. I mean, you had the Crusades, but the Crusades, this was like a thrust, and it did last for a period of time, but it had actually absolutely no impact on the vast majority of the Muslim world. It really didn't. People don't realize that, but the Crusades were isolated in that way. They weren't affecting the Indians, they weren't affecting the Indonesians, but they did affect Palestine and Syria and Lebanon. However, when Napoleon entered into Egypt, this is the beginning of the end, and I think the Muslims beginning of the end of their sovereignty, and they were very aware of that because they were unable to defend the heartland. And so I think the ulama were traumatized, the scholars of Islam, they were traumatized, and they weren't able really to respond in a way that reinvigorated the ummah.
Yes. I think as much as you're alluding also to that whole experience of colonialism, or being under colonial subjugation for the entire Muslim world, which lasted through, last couple of centuries, to say the least. Now we are free, so-called. But still, you look at the stagnation of societies, you look at how stratified we have become, and then you wonder.
One of the foundations of Western civilization is a book called the Iliad, which was attributed to Homer, and it's about a war that lasted over a decade, and by the end of it the Greeks decided that they couldn't keep doing this, so they devised a strategy, and the plan was to build a horse, and they would take their ships out, leave this huge horse, and take their ship out and leave it off. Well, the horse was actually filled with Greek soldiers, and the Trojans brought it in to the city walls, and they thought it was a gift from the Greeks who had now departed and left them, and only one